Hello everyone. Welcome again to our usual Facebook live session every Tuesday here at 2 p.m. London. Now, if you've just tuned in, send me a thumbs up or type in a yes in the comment box. Or if you're watching this on recording, give us a thumbs up anyway, or a yes in the comments box, or both, to show that you could hear me loud and clear. Okay, good. Now, for those of you who don't really know who I am the IELTS tutor from the IELTStutor.com. I've been a former IELTS examiner and qualified IELTS trainer with the British Council for about 10 years and have been helping IELTS candidates around the world face-to-face in classrooms as well as online. Basically to help IELTS candidates get through problems that are mostly related to the IELTS test. I'm also the founder of the IELTStutor.edublogs.org, which is a blog that's all about tips and strategizing for doing well in the IELTS test. Okay, so in today's lesson, we'll be taking a look at 20 important tips that can help you, the IELTS candidate, perform a lot better in the test. Okay, so let's start off with the first tip, which is the listening test. Now, usually at the beginning of the test, you will be provided an example to understand how to approach the task and answer the question appropriately. Now, you should try and use this opportunity to make yourself familiar with what you'll need to do for the task that's given to you, and at the same time try to familiarize yourself with the sounds, the situation, the speakers who are having the conversation, or the person who's giving a lecture or instructions. Now, this is very important because you need to first understand the context, which will later help you to answer the question easily. So try to use the example to get yourself situated, okay? Now, the second tip is that you'll need to keep listening until the recording stops. While you listen, try to look at the questions where that part is being played. Now, if you need to write some notes down, pick up your pencil and do so on the question paper for you to refer back to it later. But try not to write on the answer sheet because you will need to keep that paper clean and neat so that when you submit your paper, your marker can easily read your answers without all those cancellation marks or rubber marks where you've rubbed out all your answers. Okay, so try to scribble your notes down on the question paper, but remember that all your papers will be collected at the end of the test. So you won't have a copy of your notes to take away with you as souvenirs, okay? All right, now with the listening test, if you're already familiar with these in your practice sessions, you will find that there are quite often pauses between each section of the test. I would strongly recommend that you use this time to prepare for the next few questions ahead. Because one of the most common mistakes that I've seen candidates do is they look back at the answers that they've written and they try to recall or to remember whether or not they've given the right answers. Okay, and then they erase their answers and then rewrite them. So please don't do this because you have no time to remember and correct in the listening test, okay? Now, the silent gaps that you see between each section of the recording, the gaps are there to prepare you for the next set of questions that you should expect ahead of you. So always look ahead. Don't look back, okay? Can I repeat that? Don't look back. Try to use this time to predict the information that you're expected to hear, and try to see if if you're given a task where you need to fill in a blank, try to guess if it requires you to write, make an educated guess to see whether you're supposed to write a noun or a verb or a number or an adjective and so on and so forth. Okay, so always predict your answers. Now, when you do your listening test, try to answer the questions in the order that they appear on the question paper. Because always remember that the answers usually appear in the same order as what you'll hear in the recording. So if you happen to skip an answer box and then find that you have discovered the answer to the next item, now this obviously means that you've lost or missed the opportunity to find the information that that was given earlier. So, you've got to quickly move on. Don't dwell over it. Now, depending on your luck, sometimes the clue to an earlier answer or even the answer itself may be repeated even after the next one has been given. So, it's always worth paying careful attention to the recording and try not to lose hope, okay? Even if you feel that you've lost marks for missing crucial information. The reason why I say this is because I sometimes notice that when candidates do their practice tests and happen to miss one or two answers, they show that they've given up on the test, okay? So this is, how you treat the test is entirely up to you. If you allow yourself to be stressed over one simple mark, okay, at the expense of maybe missing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 marks later on, you just have to be prepared to pay again to sit for another IELTS test, okay? Try to imagine this situation. It's a little bit like a hurdle race in the Olympic Games. Okay? Now, there is still a chance that you, as the runner, will come out getting the gold medal or be at first place, even if you've knocked down 1 or 2 hurdles along the way. Now, in the Olympic Games, you don't see Olympians giving up the race, even after they've knocked down 1 hurdle. So why should you do this in the IELTS test? So it's a very silly thing to do, to try and, to give up hope, just for the simple fact that you've missed 1 or 2 answers. Now, once you've finished listening to all sections of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer all the information that you've collected from the question paper, all your notes and scribbles. You need to use those 10 minutes to transfer all of that onto the answer sheet. Okay? So this is the time for you to look back at your answers, not while you're listening to the recording. It should be in the last 10 minutes of your test. So use this opportunity to look back at your answers, copy them very carefully onto the answer sheet. Now, when I say very carefully, I'm talking about paying attention to your spelling, hyphens or dashes or apostrophes or commas or 1-word or 3-word answers, handwriting and so on, okay? Make sure, especially, that your handwriting is clear enough for the person who's going to assess your paper to be able to tell the difference between an L and a T, okay? The difference between an A or an E or an A or an O, and so on. So if you find that your handwriting is an issue, then I would suggest you write your answers in capital letters, because you won't lose any marks over writing in capitals, okay? At the same time, be very careful that you place each answer onto the correct question number box, because I've seen accidents where candidates have somehow missed one box and then incorrectly placing the following 7 answers in the wrong boxes. And the sad part was all of these candidates' answers were correct. Okay, So that's like 7 marks gone completely. So don't let this terrible experience be your experience. Okay, so we'll move on to tip number 6, which involves the IELTS academic reading test. Now, you can begin this test by quickly looking at the passage or skimming the passage to see the kind of texts that you'll have to deal with. So skim for the topic, okay, skim for the style, skim for the source that each passage is likely to come from, skim for the purpose of the writer. For example, does it look like they're writing to explain how something works, or does it look like they're trying to argue a point about something? So in other words, try to think, is the passage factual and descriptive, or does it look like it presents opinions and argument? And try to guess what kind of reader is the writer writing to or writing for. So all of these things, all of these questions can be done in a space of less than 2 minutes. So try to skim all 3 passages between 2 to 3 minutes to answer all of these questions before you do the tasks. Okay? Now, next tip. Now, while you do your reading test, as you read, try not to understand the exact meaning of every word that you come across, or every phrase that's new to you or unfamiliar to you, because you really don't have time to do this. But I still see some students using a dictionary whenever they do a practice test in my classroom. Okay, now we've got to be realistic about this, okay? Now, in the real test itself, you will not be allowed to refer to a dictionary when you enter the exam room, okay? So try not to use the dictionary when you do your practice tests. I mean, it's okay for you to use a dictionary when you need to look up something while you read for leisure, or use a dictionary when you come across something interesting on TV, okay, or on the internet and so on. But avoid doing this during practice tests. So in the test itself, you will have to try to adopt different techniques to try and work out the meaning without using the dictionary. Now, how do we do this? Basically, there are 3 ways to try to guess the meaning of something. Okay, number 1, think about what part of speech the word is. Think about the context. How does it fit in the context of the sentence? Is it an adjective? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? Okay, number 2, look at how the word is formed. Is it a combination of 2 words or a compound noun? For example, the word echolocation. So if you read a sentence that says, whales and dolphins use sound in 2 ways, for communication and for echolocation. Now, the word echolocation itself is a combination of the word echo and location. And so from the word echo, which means sound that bounces off a surface, and location, which means a place or position, we can somehow deduce that from this context, that whales and dolphins use sound to communicate, as well as produce or create sounds that echo or are heard again, to perhaps find or locate their way in the dark using these echoes. Okay? And the final strategy for trying to guess meanings of words is to try to look at how the word is used in context. Okay? Look at the text that comes before and after the word. Sometimes an explanation is given through the use of examples. For instance, in this sentence, sound is an efficient way to transmit information. If humans shout to someone, it is unlikely that blah, blah, blah. Now, so if you didn't understand the word transmit, okay, the next sentence, if humans shout to someone, you could somehow guess that this is another word for sending out messages. Of course, it's not necessary for you to understand all the words in a passage, but you do need to understand which words that are important because they give you important information or key information to answer the question. All right, let's move on to tip number 8. Okay, sometimes reading tasks have an example answer. If this is the case, study it carefully and try to think of why the answer is correct. Now, in some cases, reading tasks may ask you to use words from the passage in the answer, but in other situations, you'll have to use your own words. You can find, situations where you'll have to use words from the text, quite commonly found in short answer questions. For example, answer these questions with words from the text. Using no more than 3 words for each answer. From the text. Now, it doesn't get any clearer than this. So there is absolutely no excuse for candidates not to follow this instruction. And then you have the sentence completion task types that says, complete these sentences with words from the text, using no more than 3 words, blah, blah, blah. And don't forget the summary completion tasks as well. Okay, they say, complete the summary below. Choose no more than 2 words from the text for each answer. Now, all of them ask candidates to answer or complete with words from the text. So please check the instructions carefully and avoid using your own words. Okay. Tip number 10. Just like the instructions that tell you to use the words from the text, there will be instructions to let you know how many words you'll need to provide. Again, with short answer questions, like answer these questions with words from the text using no more than 3 words for each answer. Now, they're not asking you to write 4 words or 5. The instructions are very clear. Use no more than 3 words, which means that you're allowed to use a maximum of up to 3 words for your answer. It's the same for sentence completion tasks, using no more than 3 words for each answer. Or even completing a summary. Choose no more than 2 words from the text for each answer. So, if you've overlooked these important instructions during the test, that would be at least 1 or 2 marks, or depending on how many answers you've given, gone, just gone completely. Even if your answers are correct, if that's the case, it's a shame. Okay? Now let's move on to academic writing. Now, in writing for the academic test, candidates must always keep to the topic set. Now, what do I mean by this? It means that if you're given a topic to talk about, for instance, the number of students who take various types of transport to go to school, then stick to this topic. Avoid making too many general references like there is an increasing trend in the graph or the trend reaches a plateau, without referring to what these lines or trends mean. The same for task 2. If you're asked to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of living in the city, then please do so by linking it back to the task in the question paper. Do not try to prepare sections of the text before the exam itself. Now, I'll give you an example where candidates have made mistakes with this. Now, this is taken from the Cambridge Practice Tests for IELTS series from volume 11, test number 2. Okay, listen to the question. Some people claim that not enough of the waste from homes is recycled. They say that the only way to increase recycling is for governments to make it a legal requirement. To what extent do you think laws are needed to make people recycle more of their waste? Now, I've seen opening expressions which have nothing to do with what you'll need to discuss in the task. And instead, I see memorized expressions which does not keep to topic. So like in this essay, I will discuss the advantages and disadvantages of recycling and offer my opinion on this. Now, the task does not say that you have to talk about the good points or bad points of recycling. It's simply asking your opinion on whether we need laws to make people recycle more of their waste. You'll need to talk about why laws are necessary for this. You may throw in a sentence or two about why recycling is good and why not doing this is bad, but this should not be the main focus of your essay. So my point is, keep to the topic and avoid memorized expressions which don't match what you're supposed to be doing. Tip number 12. Keep to the suggested timing. 20 minutes for task 1 and 40 minutes for task 2. Okay? Now, even though you may have been told many times, perhaps, that there are more marks in task 2 than in task 1, it simply does not mean that you should spend longer than 40 minutes for task 2 or the essay. Be reasonable with your time allocation. Okay, you will still be marked for task 1. And if you get a really low band score for writing task 1, it's not going to help you with getting a high overall score. If you feel that timing is a problem for you, try to do lots of time practice, lots and lots of time practice. Because efficient time management for the test is something that everybody can achieve with lots and lots of practice. As for language skills, not so easy, I'm afraid. So even if your English is not up to band 9 standard, don't let problems with timing be an extra headache for you, okay? You can absolutely control how much time you have, but don't let time control you. I have many times told my students to break their time allocation further in this way. So in task 1, you actually don't have 20 minutes to write. You only have 10 minutes. So what you should do is start with 5 minutes of analyzing your graph or letter. Now, this is the planning stage. Next, think about how you're going to point out the main features in your description. Now, for letter writing, go through specific details in your head. The what, the where, the why, who, when, how much, how long, etc., etc. Okay, and then write your report or letter for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, stop. Look at your writing. Go over it. Read it under your breath. See if there's anything to change. This should take no longer than 5 minutes. Okay? So, now move on to task 2. Do the same thing. Start off with looking at how you can approach the task for 5 minutes. Plan out your ideas on paper. Think of reasons, think of examples, think of details. Now, once that's done, in exactly 5 minutes, write your essay. Do not stop until the last 5 minutes. Use the remaining time to, again, go over your essay for mistakes which could easily be avoided, like spelling, consistency in tense, links to main ideas, an established introduction with a foreground, a nice rounding off at the end, and so on. Now, you can do all this with a clock timer in front of you. And once you get used to this timing, sitting for the real test would be an absolute breeze. Okay, now for this to work in the test, by all means, bring a watch with you. And I don't mean a smart watch, because I've heard that some centres don't allow smart watches in the exam room, which I think is a smart move, because it prevents possible cheating. But there should be a big old clock in the test room for everyone to see, so be sure to use that to your advantage. Next tip. Try to organize and link your ideas and sentences appropriately. Now, this means using a wide range of language and showing your ability to discuss ideas and opinions in task 2. I've seen many articles written about this by other teachers on the internet, especially about using linkers and cohesive devices. However, be careful not to overdo this. Avoid starting every sentence with a linker. Don't do what some IELTS candidates do in their writing. Just use linkers for the sake of using linkers, just to pass the test. Now, if that linker doesn't make any sense, or if your examiner or reader doesn't understand the relationship of your ideas with that linker that you've used, then you will have failed in communicating your ideas. So instead of gaining marks, you lose marks. Okay? Also, with language, be very careful not to write too many complex sentences either. Okay, try to put a bit of simple sentences here and there. Pepper your writing with a few simple sentences here and there. Now remember, the examiner is looking for a range of sentences. So, variety is key. This is the same with linkers. Don't use the same one over and over again, and don't force yourself to use a linker with every single sentence. But it does help to have a variety when you do use them. Now, when you demonstrate your ability to discuss your opinions, try to always refer back to your plan so that you don't stray off the topic. Support your main ideas with lots of explanations, lots of examples. Okay? Another key thing to remember here is quality over quantity. Now, in your essay, the examiner is not looking for 20 reasons why living in the city, for example, is better than living in the countryside. What examiners are looking for is some depth and some development in your arguments. So, instead of trying to explain with many, many reasons why city life is good, try using 1 or 2 reasons why this is so, and expand them further with more explanations and examples to emphasize your opinions and reinforce your points, okay? So, 2 things to remember. Number 1, variety is key. And number 2, quality over quantity. Oh, and one more thing. Don't try to show off by using language that you're unfamiliar with. Because this does not impress your examiner, especially since very often I've seen these big expressions used incorrectly in context. So only use language that you're confident in. Tip number 14. Now, I'm sure this has been said many times before, but if your writing is shorter than 150 words in task 1, and less than 250 words in task 2, then you're guaranteed to lose marks. This should not be what you're aiming for anyway. You should set a target of between 170 to 180 words in task 1 and between 270 to 280 words in task 2. Any longer than that, you'll only be wasting time. You will not, I repeat, will not get extra marks for writing more. So, instead of using that precious, valuable time to check your work for mistakes, you'll have lost time writing more and possibly making more mistakes while overlooking the ones that you could have corrected in other parts of your text. Now, when you have finished your writing, it is always a good idea to go over your work at the end. Okay, just as it is important for you to plan your writing at the beginning, it's very important to go over your work at the end. What you should aim for is 5 minutes to analyze your task and think of ideas to address the task. Make sure that you know how many parts there are to the task. When you plan, make notes, not complete sentences. You don't have time for this. At the same time, don't continue writing your essay right until the end when the time comes for you to submit. You have to give yourself enough time to check your essay. Now, I can't tell you how many times band scores have had to be reduced because of mistakes which could have so easily have been avoided. So, please allow yourself plenty of time at the end to check your work. Let's move on to the speaking test now. Now, what you'll have to remember is to avoid giving a prepared speech. This quite commonly happens at the beginning of the interview, where candidates begin their test very confidently, talking about their job or their studies because they've prepared a big, long speech about their work or school. Let me let you in on a little secret. This part of the test is usually to break the ice and make you feel comfortable about the questions that come afterwards. Okay, the examiner doesn't usually pay careful attention to this part because they know that candidates have prepared themselves to answer this question quite smoothly. So, yeah. The other dangerous thing to do is to talk about something that's completely unrelated to the topic. Let me give you an example of this. Now, suppose that you're asked to describe a favorite bookshop in IELTS Speaking Part 2. But when it's time for you to talk, you decide to say something about your favorite book instead of your favorite bookshop. Now, the examiner notices this and will gently prompt you to go back to topic by pointing at the task booklet to steer you back in the right direction. Now, you see this and, number one, either ignore the examiner and continue talking about what you want to say without any reference to the topic, or number two, panic because you feel that you've given the wrong answer and start hesitating because you're confused. Or worse, you stop talking altogether. Either way, you won't be in a win-win situation. Now, do you really want that to happen to you? Do you really want to waste time preparing a speech that A, will probably not come up in the test, or B, will look like it's the question for the answer that you've prepared for, but actually is not? Or C is actually something that you've prepared for, but whose answer will probably be ignored because the quality of your answer doesn't match up to the rest of the questions that you've been asked throughout the interview. It doesn't really matter anyway because all roads will lead to a reduced band score. Congratulations. So be wise, just don't prepare your answers. Now, the next tip number 17. Now, this may be controversial and can lead to some people disagreeing with me, but that's fine anyway because everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Now, the consensus here is that IELTS candidates should speak directly to the examiner and not to the recording equipment. Now, to this tip, I say ignore it. Of course, it's always good manners to speak directly to the person you're talking to, and doing this may also lead to increasing your self-confidence. However, please do not let this determine the quality of your performance in the speaking test. Okay? If you are a naturally shy person and feel much better talking to the clock, then by all means, talk to the clock. Your examiner will not take offense. They will not be offended. Neither will they reduce your band score for you not looking at them in the eye. So it's okay. If your eyes naturally wander around the room as you speak, let them travel around the room. There is nowhere in the IELTS speaking assessment that tells examiners in the IELTS speaking assessment to penalize candidates for not looking at them. Okay? This is a myth. In my experience examining hundreds of candidates, I've seen different types of speakers with different styles of speaking, and not once have I had to punish anybody for not looking at me while they speak. This is not a test requirement, so don't worry. You might want to refer back to a blog that I posted earlier, or an earlier podcast episode about eye contact or maintaining eye contact in IELTS speaking. That should put your mind at rest. Okay, that should put your mind at ease. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay, tip number 18. Whenever you reply yes or no to the examiner's questions, try to add more details to each one of your answers. Okay, in each case, always aim to explain at least one point. For example, in part 1, if you're asked this question, do you like going to the cinema? Don't just say yes and then stop right there. Try to explain why you like going to the cinema. Use the WH questions like, who do you like to go with? What kinds of movies do you like watching? When do you normally go there? Why is it better than watching films at home? Which cinema do you normally go to in your hometown? And so on and so on. Now, it's the same thing for part 3. If your examiner asks you, do you think it's a good idea to control how much time children spend on the computer? Don't just say, yes. Explain why. Use the Oreo method. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about by the Oreo method, you may want to have a look at my blog post and search for how to develop your answers in IELTS Speaking Part 3 in the search box on the sidebar, and it will lead you to the article that explains what this means. But for the benefit of those who aren't clear about what I'm talking about, it simply means this. Oreo stands for O, which means opinion. So give your opinion. R means reason. Follow this opinion with a reason. E means example. So after your reason, give an example. And the final O means opposite situation. This means, or this requires you to imagine the opposite situation through the use of a conditional sentence. So for instance, on the topic of restricting children's use of the computer, you could say, you could give the opposite situation. If children were given too much time on the computer, they'd end up not doing their homework and be in danger of losing their eyesight when they get older, and so on. Okay, so develop your answers clearly. In part 1, try to aim for 3 to 4 complex sentences, no longer than that. In part 3, there's no maximum limit to the number of sentences that you should give. You can give 10 sentences, you can give 100 sentences, that's fine. But try to avoid giving 1 or 2 sentences in your answers. Aim for at least 5 complex sentences in part 3. Okay? I think one thing to remember is imagining your answer asking you why after you've finished each answer. Like, what's your favorite color? Yellow. Why? Because it makes me feel happy. Why? Bright colors put me in a good mood. Why? I feel that dark colors bring me down and I feel quite depressed when I'm in a dark room with lots of dark colors around me. Why? I'm not really sure. Maybe it's all psychological, so bright colors have a positive effect on me. Blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Tip number 19. Now, this is a tricky one. A lot of candidates seem to think that the IELTS speaking test is a test of their general knowledge. Now, this is simply not true. It does not test your general knowledge or how much you know about the world. Although having this knowledge would help you with your answers in the sense that you'd be able to develop your responses and provide more depth to your answers. Now, in the interview, you'd only be tested on your ability to communicate effectively. And this means your fluency, grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation. You will not be marked on content. Okay? Okay, so now we've come to the final tip. Tip number 20. When you respond to the examiner's questions, make sure that you organize and link your ideas and sentences appropriately. At the same time, use a wide range of structures as well as vocabulary to show your skill at communicating. And very importantly, try to talk at normal speed. Not too fast, not too slow. Now, I've seen situations where candidates spoke really, really slowly because they were concentrating too much on getting their grammar right. And other situations where people were very nervous and they were speaking so fast that I wasn't able to follow what they were saying. So, maintain a normal talking speed. And to do this, you'll need to practice recording your voice as you answer questions during your speaking practice. And not just listen to them yourself, but try to get other people to listen to your answers and say whether you were speaking too slowly or too quickly. Okay, so that's all for today. The 20 tips for IELTS success. I hope you have found the information in today's lesson helpful in knowing how to approach your IELTS preparations. So head on over to the IELTStutor.com for a summary of the information of what was mentioned in today's lesson. You can also listen to the podcast version on iTunes. And if you'd like to know if you're guilty of making some very common mistakes that I see or hear among IELTS candidates, then follow me on Instagram for a list of common problems that you should be avoiding. If you have found today's lesson very helpful and would like to see more, don't forget to like the IELTS Tutor page on Facebook or just give me a thumbs up in the comments box and tell a friend about it. If you need more guidance and help with preparing for your IELTS test, don't hesitate to reach out to me at the IELTStutor.com and have a look at the range of courses that are available for you, which would be helpful in pulling your score up. If you'd like a chat, shoot me a message on the website and I'll get right back to you. In the meantime, have a great week preparing for your IELTS test. I'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching.